Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Burnout Podcast. My name is Skip O, and I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor today, Throttle and Thrive. Throttle and Thrive is a 6-bed facility in California. It's a men's substance misuse facility exclusively serving first responders and veterans. Throttle and Thrive can be reached at 805-701-1309. 805-701-1309. When you make that call, Siobhan Thompson will probably be the one to answer, and she's the CEO there. And then she'll ask you some questions. And then after you decided you want to change your life and you want to live life, she will personally come and pick you up at the airport once you fly out anywhere from the United States. So keep them in mind if you're out there or a family member's out there and they need some help, whether it's for addiction, mental health, or whatever the case may be. Please go to throttleandthrive.com. Check them out for more information. Thank you. Jared, Hannah, thank you for coming on tonight. Appreciate you.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Yeah, really great to be here.
Okay, so people can get to know you. Give a little bit of background about yourself, married, kids, and all that stuff, and why are we on here today? So let the people know about what's going on with you.
So we are the founders of Restoration Farms, and it's a nonprofit ministry. We're just starting to help first responders with their mental health. And we've been married 17 years now, and we have 6 boys. And we have an adventurous household. So every day is a new adventure, new rock climbing wall, new swim this, climb that, jump over that kind of thing. So we're a lively household. But one reason that we're really passionate about this is in 2019, I went through a really serious mental health crisis. I'm a 17-year firefighter. So pretty much all of our marriage, I've been a firefighter. I've been full-time for 13 years working as a paramedic firefighter in a pretty busy 911 system in Indiana. And I went through just a major mental health crisis of PTSD. I was out of work for several months. I couldn't even function outside of having panic attacks and sleepless nights, etc. And God really just allowed our marriage to go through the ringer in a major sense. So on every level, we've had to learn how to reconnect to each other, to our own hearts, to God. As I've gone through trauma therapy and recovery programs and things, it's been helpful, but it's also been hard. And in those kind of things, the only way out is really through. So we've been through a lot, and we are encouraged to be coming to the other side of a lot of things. Of course, it's always a journey and you're growing, but we've just always had a passion for first responder ministry, and we've kind of wondered where that would take place, but now we kind of know. It's a passion for mental health and well-being, and to see firefighters being strong in their careers and having hope in their hearts.
Well, I'm glad you came through it, and it seems like you're getting better, and you're ready to share your so-called brokenness with other people in your faith. Hannah, give us a little background about you, and I think I know why you're passionate about it, but let me hear it from your voice.
Yeah, sure. So I've been a registered nurse for 18 years. Jared and I met while I was in nursing school, and we both agreed pretty quickly that we had a passion for ministry, and we're wondering what form will that look like in the future? Where will God lead that heart for ministry? He jumped into the fire service. I worked in the clinical setting for a few years. We started having kids, boy after boy after boy. And then, like you said, in 2019, he started out with that PTSD crisis. He didn't mention, but he also worked in death investigation for 3 years prior to working on the fire department. So had a lot of additional exposure to some traumatic things there. When he first started out showing symptoms of his PTSD crisis with my nursing background, I always felt like I should have realized, I should have known, I should have seen the warning signs before we hit that crisis point. But going into it, I mean, you just think life is stressful. He's not sleeping well. He's not wanting to eat much because he has too much on his plate. We were in the middle of trying to move from our house in South Bend up north across the state line into Michigan. We had just had our 6th baby. We had a son that had active Lyme's disease at the time as well. And so there was just a lot of factors there. And then Jared's grandfather died unexpectedly. So everything kind of came to a head. And that's kind of when he started dealing with the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, some suicidal ideation. We reached out to some friends of ours at that time and started getting direction on what kind of help that he needed. So
when you're looking at him, like you said you as a nurse, you should have recognized it. There's a lot of family members that I've heard said the same thing. I mean, how was you feeling when he was going through all that? What was your emotions like? That might be a stupid question, but somebody might need to relate to you about how your emotions were going through all that.
Sure. I think that there was a lot of fear, but I knew that I couldn't let my boys see that for a while. They went and they lived with a couple other family friends, kind of went between them and my parents. So we had some additional help so that I could focus on Jared and getting him the help that he needed. There was also a lot of overwhelm because a lot of what he was doing previously, and even with the contract on our house and getting ready to move, all of that was on my shoulders now. So taking over the role of the caregiver, the role of running the household, the finances, the chauffeur, all of the elements of life kind of almost came to a single parent kind of position there, and then taking care of Jared on top of that. So, in the midst of all of that emotion, I think at the time I didn't realize it was there because I just had to do the next thing. There wasn't really an option for me to break down. Wasn't really time or space for those emotions to come out. And so in that moment, I think my goal was I want to do this well and I want to do it right. And it's only coming out of that situation when we've gotten back to a point of stability that I realized I never honored how hard that actually was. And so I've had to now go back and reprocess a lot of my own experience in that to show compassion and to show empathy to what my heart and my body went through in that time.
Wow. Everybody, I think her alias is Hannah Norton, but she is Wonder Woman. We got one.
She is.
Well, I tell you what, Jared, I know, my wife felt the same way. She was a dispatcher and she was a caregiver, and she was the things you were describing. We had 5 kids. So my whole thing, my wife could relate with what you're saying. Jared, man, I can relate with you when you're going through all that. How I felt, I'm watching my wife doing all this. I want to do something. I felt freaking guilty. I felt I just couldn't function, do the little things, or I put it off that I was being lazy or whatever. Did you feel any of those feelings? And I'm not trying to put anything. How did you feel when you were going through that?
So I dealt with shame a ton. I think in the first responder culture, we're people who do things, we're people who rescue other people. And we also live with kind of a mentality that says, I have no needs, right? Like we even say it on the radio, and we're sort of proud to say it when we're in a fire. We got this. I've got no needs, or something like that.
Sure.
And so I think that mentality, when your world comes crashing down and you're no longer who you were, there's just a ton of shame that I think I dealt with, and it seems to be a commonplace amongst other people who are struggling. It's like I used to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I can't anymore. So I don't feel like I'm who I should be. But that's really a lot of my own ideal that I've created for myself as to who I should be or shouldn't be. But it's still a weight that you carry emotionally that is huge, definitely.
Absolutely. I tell you, okay, you guys are going through these feelings. You're going through where you got to be the caregiver. And what brought it to the final, I don't want to say final straw, what brought it to where we got to get you some help? I can't handle you anymore doing all this. And do you mind sharing where that help came from? And whatever you're comfortable with. You don't have to say anything that you're not comfortable with saying.
Yeah. So November 9th, 2019, I had noticed some symptoms of sleepless nights and some anxiety, some panic attacks prior to that. Jared wound up awake all night long. Just one anxiety panic attack after the next. Some of it felt like spiritual attacks. Some of it felt like a little bit of disconnection with reality. At that point, with my nursing background, I knew that we were in a place that we needed something more than just, hey, let's say a prayer together, or let's give you some Benadryl and hope that you can get a better night's sleep, you know? So we contacted some local friends of ours that are also licensed therapists. They directed us to head to the ER. So that is the first place that we went, because his biggest need at that point was to get some sleep. Once you've been awake for that long, your mind can't function on a normal level. And so it just kind of pushes you to that next mental instability level if you're not sleeping. So that morning I dropped all of our kids off at a friend's house. We went over to the ER, got in there, got into the ER room. We explained what was going on, and basically we're told we can't help you. He's not at a point to where he's severe enough that we need to admit him. He's not at a point to where we're just going to start medicating him. He needs to see his primary physician. So you guys just need to go home and see what you can do. So it was, we didn't get really any help from the ER
gave me
at
a
all.
dose of a sort of a mild medication to calm me down. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
It was
Sure. Okay.
a short-term,
So
lasting thing.
they're saying they can't help you, and you're standing there. What's next? What do you do next?
Yeah. So we headed home. We have a lot of great community around us, a lot of great resources that we could tap into. So I called my parents, who called our family physician, who is also a personal friend of ours. And it was an amazing, just amazing response from him. He came over to our house.
Wow.
He sat down. He heard Jared's story.
Yeah.
He heard what was going on. And he said, I'm going to call you in a script for something stronger to help you sleep tonight. And then I need you to follow up with your primary physician tomorrow. So he got Jared some medications to help him get some sleep that night. I got those all locked away, so they were in a safe spot.
Sure.
And then we followed up with his physician the next day, and they started talking through medication options. So that's kind of the first pathway that we took, was the medication route. So
yeah, that kind of turned the volume down enough to allow me to sleep. And so I was, in a better state just from being able to sleep. And that made somewhat of a difference. That's a first step, starting to find a sense of safety internally, so you can even rest.
No, I get it. I tell you what, sleep is crucial, especially with us, with anybody, but when first responders, you're in that mode, it's hard to get a normal life. Even after you retire, after you've been doing it for a long time, it's hard to, that so-called normal sleep. But okay, so you got the medication, you got some sleep. Now what comes after that?
yeah. So after that, we met with our friends who were therapists, kind of told them some of what was going on. And they had us started to encouraged us to start looking into some residential programs to see if we could get him in a place where he could start working through some of the trauma that was there.
Yeah.
So that we could get to those root issues and really start processing back through those. Unfortunately, again, we're coming into the holidays now, so getting close to Thanksgiving, moving toward selling our house. We had a closing date of December 17th. We had a family Christmas trip planned the first weekend in December. So we kind of have all these things coming to a head here. We're making phone calls for local clinics, for local residence programs or day therapy programs. And a lot of them were full. They just didn't have space. They didn't have room. They would not admit him on a critical level unless he was actively suicidal. So even with the suicidal ideation, unless there was a plan in place, they were so full, they could not accept him into those programs. So he met with the therapist a couple times. They talked through some things. I talked to my sister, who's also a licensed family therapist. She highly recommended EMDR therapy and said that would probably be one of the best options for him, just to really turn that volume down and help him to move forward in that processing. So looking into all of our resources locally, there weren't many EMDR therapists in our area. And one of the critical aspects I was looking for in an EMDR therapist for him was somebody who he could connect to. So who had experience with first responders or had personal experience as a first responder and a Christian. Those were two elements that I was looking for in a therapist. We decided to have him go ahead and come with us on our family vacation that first weekend of December. Things were challenging. Not impossible, but there was a lot of extra fear, anxiety there, especially since we were headed to water parks. So,
you know what?
But as we were,
I'm good right now, but me getting around a bunch of kids, water parks or anything, I get anxiety. I think we get older. That's why you guys, when you're younger, you can have kids. Get older, it's like, and I'm not trying to make light of the situation. I thought, you're going into where? Okay.
Right.
Hey, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
Well, that was one of my triggers because of some water-related traumas that I'd seen or dealt with. So that was kind of a big deal for me going into that. But it was helpful to get some basic skills from the therapist that I talked to. She wasn't competent to do EMDR therapy or to really help me dig deep into my trauma related to work, but she was able to teach me some mindfulness skills and some tricks to deal with just basic anxiety and panic attacks. And so that was super helpful. Even going into that, like I had a little bit of foundation of skills to be able to use when what do you do when you feel afraid? You do this or that. And a little bit of exposure therapy kind of mentality to say, well, I'll stand in this environment until I can realize, like, okay, this is one reality versus what my irrational thought is saying, and I can accept that. So just some basic skills there were very helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
there.
You're fine. It was a good point to put in there. So as we were on this trip, we were there with some friends and spent some time praying with them. And one morning, as I was having my devotions, I just had this thought. Samaritan's Purse has an Operation Heal Our Patriots program. It's for veterans up in Alaska, but I know that they do follow up with those veterans. And so I determined that I was going to reach out to Samaritan's Purse to find out if they had any local resources for follow-up therapists that would have some sort of either combat, military, or first responder experience and also be a believer. So I sent an email to them. And within about 12 hours, I got a response back from the department head of Operation Heal Our Patriots, who connected me with the head of their first responder division, and also connected me with one of their EMDR therapists who works with the OHOP program. So I connected with the head of their first responder division, and he basically opened his home. He said, come down, stay with us, stay in our guest suite. You can meet with our EMDR therapist in South Carolina. If you guys can get here, we will host you. We will help you guys get the therapy that he needs so that you guys can move forward in life and in ministry.
So did you go?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
I did 5 days.
Don't leave me hanging.
I did 5 days of intensive EMDR therapy. It was like 4 or 5 hours a day. And it was really pretty brutal because I had like 35 years of stuff that I just had pushed down. A little bit of some childhood trauma, and then you mix that with death investigation experience and my work experiences. Just a lot of things I've been ignoring for a long time.
Sure.
And my therapist sort of described it as having a logjam, a logjam of emotion that just is all pent up. And lots of volume associated with that. And so it took time to sort of work through that log jam. But it was a really powerful tool, the EMDR therapy, to start turning down the volume so I could engage with my traumas because I had created such a wall of horrific fear between myself and those parts of my heart that I couldn't engage with them at all. And they were much larger than life in that place.
Sure. So you was there for, was it 5 days?
Yeah, I think it was 5 days.
So you're there for 5 days. You work through EMDR. I've done EMDR too, and I highly recommend it to people, whatever trauma, whether you're a first responder or just have trauma in your life. It worked for me, and it is emotional, but it pays off. That's what I found out. So you did the EMDR, you come back home, and did they give you any other suggestions when you come home? Any like an aftercare plan or what they could do? Anything that you could do at home?
So I got some basic skills of how to deal with anger. Anger was a big thing for me, and for the way I had dealt with anger was just like anything else over the years. It was just like suppress it and pretend it doesn't exist. And so I really was angry about a lot of things, especially like the injustices you see in the world and injustices that you personally witness. So I got some resources on how to help with my anger specifically and to let my anger out and start with that. Some resources a little bit on grief processing. And so that was all really helpful. I feel like based on the pathway that we had, there weren't a lot of localized resources at the time that we were aware of to reintegrate into. So it kind of was like a little bit of a floundering phase to try to figure that out after that. Because the EMDR was really helpful to turn down the volume. But then I've got all this stuff in my story that I haven't really engaged with fully and fully processed through. So I sort of felt like I was left with a little bit of a ball of emotional spaghetti, perhaps, to try to work myself through, or us to work through together.
Sure. Well, Hannah, he did that. What did you do?
I flew down with him and stayed down there. We took our 6-month-old. So our 6-month-old had been in 7 states and on 4 airplanes by the time he was 6 months old. So a lot of those days I just spent in the apartment with the little guy, and then helped Jared do some post-processing when he came back home, asking questions, listening, that kind of thing. And by the time we got back home, we had moved over Christmas break. We went to South Carolina in between Christmas and New Year's. So we came home to kind of a new to us house, and we're trying to resettle in and that kind of thing. So once we got back, started reintegrating, we did start some marriage counseling together, which was good. In a lot of ways, I'll be real honest with you, I felt like the man who came out of EMDR therapy was a man that I didn't know. I felt like the man that I married and I had known for 12 years was an amazing man, but this man who came out of EMDR therapy was a different amazing man. Just because of some of the underlying story that had started to become more integrated into his body at that point. So.
Sure. I tell you, friends of ours, Lori File and Tony File, his wife said the same thing when he got out of treatment. He wasn't the same man that she married. Not that he was, bad. It was just different.
Yeah.
But you're not the only one is what I'm telling you both. And you probably already know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys, Christmas, you're doing your thing. You get in your new house. So what's leading you to these organizations, to your ranch you're trying to do? What's leading you to there?
Sure. We had for a while just been working through things and trying to figure it all out. And that's a growth process. And I was really struggling with some things still and just felt like I hadn't quite worked through all my issues on the deepest level that I needed to. So for several years, I was practicing what I would call like a Christ-centered mindfulness, just really a practice of being able to step away from my emotions and examine them and evaluate the stories I was telling myself, the narratives, those things. And I worked some through telehealth with the therapist that had done my EMDR, and that was helpful.
Good. But
it also just felt like I hadn't really integrated with my story completely. So Hannah started, I think it was kind of her, she just started doing a lot of research and reading on trauma and trauma recovery and mental health. And, she had gone through such a hard thing that I think it left her feeling sort of under-resourced and like she just needed to reach out to every resource she could to try to learn and to grow. And so she started doing that. And then over time, I've just realized like my own important need to learn about what's happening and how to grow. And sort of that just by sheer need, necessity is the mother of invention. Just by sheer need, every resource that I can, consume or read or listen to started to become more part of me. And then as you engage in those things, you realize like, wow, there are a lot of people out there who really are struggling and they're really hurting. Sure. and they have a need. And as I was kind of journeying out of darkness, I did see a doctor who locally, he actually does do EMDR therapy and some other therapy, and he was able to help me engage with my story on a much deeper level. So whereas the EMDR therapy sort of just turned down all the volume and helped me to be able to start engaging with the traumas and things, he was able to help me see some of the deeper messages that I was like telling myself, or narratives from childhood that I'm working off of, things like that. And so I started to be able to engage with those on a deeper level. And in the midst of that, coming out of darkness and seeing how bright light really is, it's almost like a 1,000 pounds that you've been carrying around and you didn't even know you were carrying it around. And then all of a sudden it starts to fade off. And you're like, oh my goodness, the world is so much different. And I feel lighter. I feel full of hope. I feel like I have joy that I haven't felt in a long time. And I want to share this with other people, right? Because there's just something about that is contagious, to feel joy when you haven't felt joy in a place in so long.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So that moved us towards starting Restoration Farm.
Just as he was initially going through that crisis, and even as young fire couple, when he was first starting out, we didn't see a lot of resources out there that were coming around firefighters to support them after bad calls, to help with those debriefs, to provide that kind of peer support. That's a newer idea. It just wasn't that big of a deal back then. So as we saw the lack of resource, we saw the need. And so that kind of also pushed us in the direction of focusing on mental health.
So you come up with an idea about the ranch, and what, a week or two, when this idea come up, when did it start manifesting and coming true, and you networking and all that?
So I think the idea sparked through the idea of Operation Heal Our Patriots and just loving what we saw Samaritan's Purse doing up in Alaska. And then after connecting with their first responder division and having some conversations with him, starting to think through what could we offer to guys and gals in the fire service, or even in police service, dispatchers, etc., people who are involved in our public service sphere in our communities. What could we offer them that could be similar to Operation Heal Our Patriots? So that's kind of how the idea got sparked. We started looking for some land that might be feasible to host some sort of retreat center or some sort of ranch farm for healing, recovery from those kind of traumas, and actually wound up really cool story how God saved a cool piece of land for us up in Berrien Springs, Michigan. It got tied up in a contract deal that then fell through. And the week that we were looking for property is the week that it popped back onto the market. And we happened to be the first ones to put an offer on it. So just neat how God kind of saved that property for us. So that's how we wound out here physically. And then over the last, we've been here 2.5 years now, living here in this house. We've been mulling on, thinking through what kind of aspects of support do we want to offer as a ministry to first responders. You want to share some about that?
Yeah, so I think that God had me going through a period of time where I realized like I can't help anybody else until I really get some things nailed down. And so there was a period of time where I was just really working on myself and my own story, and realizing like there's a lot of need out there, but I'm just not quite ready to meet it. But then as I felt like I've grown strength and things, and gained knowledge, gained a little bit of wisdom about this. I certainly don't know everything, and I'm not a therapist. And there are certain major limitations to who we are and what we can do. But we just started asking the question, what do first responders need? And one big passion that we have is to try to produce resources that can be redistributed across fire departments, across small groups, etc., trauma recovery groups, those kind of things, resources that really focus in on teaching firefighters basic skills of healthy lifestyle and well-being, mental health, resiliency, and also just things like, what do you do after you have a bad call? What are some steps you can take? Practical steps. Like we firefighters and paramedics, we like algorithms, something simple that you can do to deal with when you experience a bad call, because we have the potential to be exposed to trauma almost every day on the job. But whether we're traumatized or not really depends on the story we tell ourselves in the midst of that. And so if we can choose to resource ourselves in advance to learn how to tell the right kind of story through compassion and gratitude in those circumstances, we can come through something hard and experience hard things and still be buoyant and hopeful and resilient on the other side of it. And so we'd like to resource people in those ways to get on the front side of the challenges of PTSD and burnout and things. And I'd love to see rookie firefighters coming in and part of their basic training being on mental health resilience and how to ground themselves in a hard call and be present emotionally with their family or those kind of things. I would love that if that's a common part of basic training for new firefighters and things. So we'd like to develop resources that help along that line.
Sure. Cool. Hannah, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's one element that Restoration Farms is working toward providing. We kind of work on a 3-legged approach. So the one is mental health resiliency trainings. The second one is peer support. And a lot of times that shows up not just in, like, Jared's a part of the peer support team at his fire department, but also doing mental health first aid. So showing up on scenes along with Red Cross or whatever else, helping people right there in the midst of the crises, and then helping with debriefs. The last 2 years, I've been working on some coaching certification specifically along the lines of mental health. So I've gotten my board certification as a mental health coach, and then also specialties in crisis and trauma response, suicide prevention. And I'm working on a youth mental health coaching certification right now as well, so that I can work with the younger generation as well. And then the third element that we want to provide eventually, so this is more down the road, is actually having that space, having that farm or retreat center as God provides the resources, as He provides the people, so that we can host people for retreats, for recovery groups, to work through some of those traumatic things that they've experienced and find hope and healing on the other side.
We'd really like to bring a family element to that, to allow families to work on healing together and create a safe space when the time is right. I think initially for some people, the time isn't right for them to engage with their family, and maybe they need something different. But we'd like to create some offerings in that retreat sense that are very family focused and integrating back into the family focused.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you guys have a website, Facebook page, or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook and Instagram right now. Our website is under construction, so it's coming. But our Facebook is Restoration Farms Story, and our Instagram is restorationfarms.sh. The SH stands for Selah Hill. We actually are located on one of the highest points in Berrien County. So, do you got an email address that they can email you? Yeah, it's restorationfarms.sh@gmail.com.
Okay. And we'll put it in the show notes. If you guys want to look in the show notes, we'll make sure we get it down there too. So here's what I ask all my guests now. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. You got somebody, maybe it may be a family member, it may be a first responder, and I'll let you both answer. They're listening to this podcast and they're right there. They don't know what to do. Whether it's a fireman, policeman, they're struggling. They got that far off state. They come home. They sleep during the day sometimes, and they don't engage with the family. Or Jared, that person's out there waiting and just lost. Don't know what to do. It could be a fireman, policeman, or missionary. You got 30 seconds, Jared. What are you going to tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell them is that they're not alone.
Yes.
And I think that's really important for people to hear, because it's a lot of times when you're in that state, you feel so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say you're not alone. And the second thing I would tell them is that there's hope.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where they are, no matter what they're thinking or feeling, suicidality, all those things, that's a long-term solution to a temporary problem.
Mm-hmm.
All things that we're dealing with emotionally, all of the things that we're dealing with physically, they come and they go. So there's hope, and there's hope that you can have a brighter future. And there's tons of resources out there for you to find that, but the hope factor is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would also tell them that the only place I've really found the deepest kind of hope is in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sense of working through my story isn't the same without his story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell them that, and that realizing who he is and what he's done for me has been absolutely life-changing. And I've been through a series of time where, I had to struggle with even if I believed in God or not on every level, to rethink from a logical perspective, a philosophical perspective, a historical perspective, if this thing is even for real or not. Mm-hmm. I've been through those kind of struggles, but to come out on the other side and feel like I have something I can put my faith in that is so much bigger than me, that's what can really give me hope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that, Jared. Now, Hannah, you got a family member out there that's watching their loved one go downhill, don't know what to do. Now they got faith, and they're thinking, where is God in all this? Or how do I deal with this? I'm overloaded. I got another child I got to take care of. What are you going to tell them? You got 30 seconds.
Yeah. So the first thing I think I would say is give yourself a big hug, because this is hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy. No one ever called it easy. And yes, it is a lonely road. It is a super lonely road. There's so many people, even in the church culture, they don't have a clue what to say. When they would come up to me when Jared was in the midst of his crisis, their first question was, how is Jared? It was never, how are you? So know that it's okay to reach out. It's okay to tell people, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. And please ask for help. Don't try to go it alone, because nobody can run. You can't be a single parent and take care of your spouse and take care of your house and make all the money, and you just can't do it long term. So community is critical. Faith is good. Faith is beautiful, but at the same time, it's okay to say it's hard. Faith doesn't mean it has to be easy.
That's good. That's both of you. One more thing. Now, when you're going through all this, some people have a verse, they got a song, they got a slogan in their mind that helps get them through those tough times. Jared, let's go with Hannah first. Hannah, what is that for you? What's that verse, that saying that helps you get through?
So as I sat with Jesus in the midst of Jared's crisis, the thing that I kept hearing him repeat to me is, you are always safe, you are never alone, and there is always hope. So always safe, never alone, and there is always hope.
That's good. Okay, Jared, what's yours?
For me, the thing I always go back to is safety is so important, especially when the things feel so crazy inside and so threatening. So I tell myself that I'm safe. And I've learned to look around, and when you look around and you're like, okay, I'm in my environment, I'm safe, right? There's a start to safety there, but then I'm safe, I'm loved, because that's for me is really important, to feel valued, to feel loved. And I wasn't experiencing that. So I'm safe, I'm loved, and actually I'm delighted in. So for me as a first responder, I've always had trouble even feeling delight or value coming from other people. My orientation has always been, I'm there for people, right? So I'm safe, I'm loved, I'm delighted in communicates to me sort of my value as a person, and that I'm worth something. And that is really important, because I'm not just worth something for what I can do for other people, but I'm actually valuable as a human being. And sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I have to recognize that. So I'm safe, I'm loved, and I'm valued.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate both of you coming on tonight and sharing your hearts, sharing your faith, and sharing how your so-called brokenness. I want to let everybody know, Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, you can go on burnoutnetwork.org, and you can get on a support meeting. It's 8 p.m. Eastern. Jeff and Steve, they do that one. Then on the Worldwide Peer Support, they got one on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's worldwidepeersupport.org. You can jump on there, and you got support to lead you to some resources. I appreciate Jared and Hannah coming on again. We really appreciate you. I want to remind everybody, when you go home tonight, shut your cell phone off, shut your scanner off, and get some sleep. Thank you.